An expedition team is exploring the deepest cave in the world. But just as they reached the bottom of the cave, at a depth of 2,000 meters, a sudden heavy rain occurred, causing a massive flood that flooded the entire interior of the cave. The water level rose rapidly and began to submerge the entire underground space. The member at the end of the group was swept into a violent whirlpool, and his fate at that moment remained a mystery. A year later, another reckless explorer secretly broke into this cave. But when people found him, the only thing left was a mummified corpse, hanging suspended on a climbing rope because the cave was too deep and too dangerous. The rescue team was forced to separate his body into many pieces to be able to bring him back to the surface. What is even more astonishing is that the real cause leading to his death was even more unexpected. This is the story that we will tell today. Tragedy at Veryovkina Cave. Located on the border between Russia and Georgia is the famous Caucasus mountain range, in which the Veryovkina Massif is a branch of the Caucasus. With an altitude of up to 3,353 meters, this place does not seem too special. But few people know that the 4 deepest caves in the world are all located in this area, and our story takes place in the 2nd deepest cave among them. Veryovkina Cave, its depth exceeds the incredible figure of 2,000 meters. It is hard to be able to visualize how large this distance is. If you want to compare, it would be equivalent to stacking 22 statues of Liberty or 6 Eiffel Towers on top of each other. Besides, because the cave entrance is located at an altitude 85 meters above sea level, explorers will have to climb to the top of the mountain before they can find the tiny entrance, only about 3 meters wide. The discovery of this cave was completely accidental. In 1968, a group of Soviet explorers first discovered the entrance. They followed a tunnel on the right side and went down to a depth of 115 meters, but they hit a dead end and turned back to the surface. So the cave was initially named S115. By 1983, the caving club, Veryovkina from Moscow, discovered a new passage on the left side. In the next 3 years, members of Veryovkina carried out consecutive many expeditions and extended the surveyed depth down to 427 meters before encountering new obstacles and having to turn back. After that time, they renamed the cave Veryovkina to commemorate the Soviet explorer and diver Alexander Veryovkin. However, afterwards, due to many factors, including the dissolution of the Soviet Union, exploration activities were forced to stop. Not until 2000 did the exploration resume. In 2015, the Veryovkina team discovered a new vertical shaft on the right side of the entrance. At that time, they did not bring enough rope to continue going deeper, but this discovery laid the foundation for important discoveries later. From June to October 2016, the expedition team expanded the survey process from a depth of 630 meters down to 1,350 meters, but still did not find the bottom of the cave. In the next 2 years, the Veryovkina team carried out 3 more expeditions. During this time, they simultaneously surveyed a massive system of horizontal tunnels and winding paths lying 2,100 meters underground. They even discovered an ancient underground lake. At the very bottom of the cave, the final depth, measured at Veryovkina Cave, reached 2,212 meters. A shocking number, breaking the world record at that time, making Veryovkina the deepest cave in the world at that time. However, the exploration process was not always favorable. 6 months later, in September of the same year, a team of 11 members, under the leadership of the captain, Veryovkina once again entered the cave. Besides the members of Veryovkina, the group also had 2 photographers, British cavers named Robbie and Jeff. Their goal was to explore new passages and collect biological samples for analysis. The trip was expected to last about 2 weeks. In ordinary caves, explorers would be able to complete the journey and return in just 1 day. But in a cave as deep as Veryovkina, everything is completely different, not only because the entrances are extremely narrow, but some areas are also very damp, wet, and full of mud to the point that just one slip could mean death without any rescue team. To deal with that, they set up a system of camps, similar to those on Mount Everest. These 5 camps were spaced hundreds of meters apart, acting as storage for supplies and as a place to rest for the explorers. A communication wire system was also connected between each camp. Even so, to get from the first camp down to the bottom of the cave still takes at least 4 days and 8 hours. After fully preparing the equipment, 11 confident members arrived at the cave entrance. They wore specialized suits, wore headlamps, safety harnesses, and helmets, and then threw themselves into the deep darkness using climbing ropes. They continuously lowered themselves into vertical shafts hundreds of meters deep, while still always having to watch out for rocks that could fall from above at any time. Next, they would have to crawl through tunnels so narrow that even breathing became difficult. But with the experienced Veryovkina team, everything seemed to still be under control, even when they also had to support 2 additional photographers accompanying them. It only took 2 days for them to reach camp number 3. However, the deeper they went, the challenges became even more severe. The temperature inside the cave at this time was almost at freezing point between Camp 3 and Camp 4. There were also many tunnel sections, which are U-shaped passages, completely filled with water. Explorers would have to hold their breath and crawl through tunnel sections full of water and mud. They tried to squeeze their bodies, along with the heavy equipment they carried, to pass through winding rock crevices. If they got stuck halfway by some obstacle, the consequences would be extremely clear. After 4 days of arduous travel, the whole team finally reached camp number 5, the final camp located at a depth of 2,100 meters underground, on a flat area. During this time, the photographer Robbie tried to collect invertebrate animal samples and take pictures. In the next 3 days, the whole team continuously moved through horizontal tunnels at the bottom of the cave to reach the underground lake located far to the right. Some sections were extremely narrow to the point that the members had to drag their equipment and move sideways between 2 rock walls. When they arrived, everyone was stunned by the scene appearing before their eyes. At the bottom of the pitch-black limestone cave was a lake with a beautiful turquoise color. The lake was 15 meters long, 7 meters wide, and 8.5 meters under the light from the headlamps. It appeared as a scene of unimaginable beauty. However, no one realized that a disaster was silently forming above ground. By the 7th day, 2 members of the group had to leave early to catch their flight. When they reached camp number 3, they suddenly discovered a massive flood of water pouring into the cave. Immediately, they used the communication wire system to report the news down below. At that time, the remaining group was preparing breakfast at camp number 5, and they did not feel too worried. To them, rain causing water to flow into the cave was a very normal thing. Moreover, camp number 5 was located at a depth of about 2,100 meters. Right next to them was a vertical shaft with a depth of 2,200 meters, meaning that for water to flood this camp, the water would have to fill the vertical shaft about 100 meters below first. So everyone still thought they were safe. But only about half an hour later, the sound of water roared so violently that the whole cave shook. Robbie, the photographer, looked around. The whole camp was still dry, and his teammates seemed very calm, waiting for the water to recede. However, 2 more hours passed, and the flood showed no signs of weakening at all. The captain, Pavel, stood up to check and discovered the water level was almost flooding their campsite. At this point, everyone understood that if they hesitated any longer, the whole group would certainly drown underground. In an emergency situation, everyone immediately put on all their gear. So, as not to slow down the speed, the photographer Robbie decided to leave behind all the photography equipment, worth tens of thousands of dollars, and only carried the memory card sealed in a waterproof bag. After saying goodbye to his teammates, the 2 photographers, Robbie and were the first 2 people to pass through the vertical shaft to reach the climbing rope. When looking up, Robbie saw a fierce stream of water pouring straight down. No different from a giant waterfall, he hooked his climbing equipment to the cable, took a deep breath, and began the fight for survival. The extremely strong water current continuously hit the 2 people. They had to bow their heads and try to breathe through each small gap under the brim of their helmets. After climbing over the cliff and holding their breath, crawling through a narrow gap, the scene before them left both of them stunned, because the next shaft was even narrower, while the water current was much more violent, almost filling the entire space. But Robbie had no other choice. He was the leader, so if he stopped, everyone behind would be trapped and could lose their lives. Tightening the white rope, pushing the climbing device up little by little, struggling to overcome the wall of water, then continuing to crawl through rock crevices and climbing back up. The entire journey was like a nightmare. He was repeatedly battered by flood water, crushed by rocks from both sides and swallowed in the darkness. Even when he had escaped the flooded area, to reach a dry area, the survival instinct made Robbie not dare to stop even for a second. Until Jeff, right behind him, called his name loudly. Then Robbie realized that at this position, the water current had changed direction and was no longer flowing through. Right after Jeff caught up, both were safely back at Camp Number 4 at a depth of about 1,900 meters, but they did not feel happy because the sound of the floodwater was still constantly roaring throughout the cave, and the fate of those remaining in the Veryovkina team was still unknown to anyone. A moment later, they saw flashlight beams appearing on the rope. It was Andre, and right after him were the other members, who also escaped one by one. 15 minutes later, Captain Pavel, along with the others, also successfully returned to Camp Number 4 through their accounts. Everyone learned what had happened. While the whole group was trying to retreat, the vertical shaft on the right at Camp Number 5 had been completely submerged by water. Pavel was the last person in the group, so he was sucked into a massive whirlpool. He was spun around in that vertical shaft as if he had just been swept into a giant toilet bowl, and desperately fought against the water and luckily managed to grab the climbing rope. What is astonishing is that in that life and death situation, trying to find a way to escape, one member of the group still managed to carry the cooking stove, along with for sleeping bags. The photographer, Robbie, could not help but be amazed at the extraordinary will of his teammates in the Veryovkina team. At the same time, he also felt extremely lucky, because if he and Jeff were the last ones in the group, then perhaps both would not have been able to survive. The whole group stayed at Camp Number 4 for 16 hours, until the sound of the water finally subsided. Only when returning to the surface did they know the flood was caused by an extremely heavy rainfall that caused the entire underground water system to flood the cave. After the water receded, Captain Pavel returned to the cave to retrieve the camera that Robbie had left behind. The camera was completely damaged, but fortunately, all the photos on the memory card were preserved. But no one expected that. Just a few years later, another even more heartbreaking tragedy would happen right in this very cave. On August 4th, 2021, the Veryovkina team decided to enter the cave once again. But as soon as they reached the cave entrance, they discovered traces showing that someone had secretly broken in here. After going down into the cave, they found a backpack at the bottom of the first vertical shaft. Inside were some moldy chocolate bars, brand new crampons, and a climbing sticks. At Camp Number 1, they also discovered a large amount of food and supplies stored that had been used, that further reinforced the suspicion that someone had snuck into the cave. Right after passing Camp Number 2 at a depth of about 1,100 meters, they discovered an unidentified corpse. The deceased was hanging suspended on a safety rope, wearing camouflage cotton clothing and climbing shoes. This person used hand ascenders, but completely lacked foot loops. The body was only about 3 meters away from a rock ledge below. Based on the state of decomposition, they determined that this victim had been dead for at least a year. Afterwards, the team also found a bag on the rock ledge below. Inside were 2 mobile phones and a multi-tool. On that same day, the expedition immediately reported to the authorities, and on August 5th, based on missing person records from November 2020, along with photos stored in the victim's phone, the police identified the deceased as Sergei, 37 years old, a resident of the city of Sochi, Russia, based on the accident investigation published by the Russian Caving Federation later. The entire sequence of events was reconstructed on November 1st, 2020. Sergei said goodbye to his family, but he did not say where he was going. He drove for about 2 hours, from Sochi to the foot of the Veryovkina mountain range, and then walked up to the entrance of Veryovkina cave. Screenshots on his phone showed that Sergei had prepared for this trip for over a year. In his phone, he had cave maps, along with very detailed descriptions, proving that he had grasped how to enter the cave and the locations of the camps. After fixing the rope at the cave entrance, Sergei used his rappelling device to go deep down and quickly reached Camp Number 1. Here he had arbitrarily used the food, gas, and supplies that the Perovo team stored. Based on traces at the toilet area, it is highly likely that Sergei lived at Camp Number 1 for at least about a week, perhaps because the supplies here were so abundant. And the initial journey also went quite smoothly, so he did not turn back, but decided to continue going down to Camp Number 2. But the deeper he went, the freezing temperature, with slippery rock walls, began to exceed his endurance. When reaching Camp Number 2, Sergei discovered this place was completely empty. Worse yet, no one knew if he had forgotten his foot loops at Camp Number 1, or if he had never brought them from the beginning. With 2 hand ascenders, he would not be able to use his feet to create force when climbing up, and that meant he would not be able to return to the surface on his own anymore. Having no other choice, Sergei had no choice but to continue going down with the hope of finding foot loops or supplies at the camps below. No one knows how deep he finally went. However, after the previous major flood, all the camps below were left empty. Sergei did not register the expedition with any organization and also kept the journey secret from his family, so no one outside knew he was trapped desperately underground. Finally, after many days of enduring exhaustion and severe hypothermia, Sergei passed away in the cave. Afterwards, his mother requested the authorities to help bring her son's body back to the surface. Due to rescue conditions at a depth of over 1,000 meters and being extremely dangerous by August 10th, the authorities signed a document waiving liability for the Russian Caving Federation and allowed the rescue team to transport the body in parts. A rescue operation consisting of 27 volunteers was deployed. After 7 days of extremely arduous work, Sergei's body was finally brought to the surface in 10 gray transport bags. The rescue operation ended on August 17th. Volunteers handed over the final remains, along with Sergei's personal belongings, right at the cave entrance. By August 19th, the Russian government officially sent a letter of thanks to the rescue team and highly praised this extremely dangerous rescue operation.